Everybody, Jay Sweet. I'm the producer of the Newport Jazz Festival, and we are here live at the Newport Jazz Festival. We're with my friends Blake Mills and Pino Palladino. And the kind of the topic we're going to go with today on this one is session work. Blake, you and I have known each other a really long time, and I've been fortunate to watch you get to where you're actually playing, the two of you here live at the Newport Jazz Festival after an incredible Newport Folk Festival, by the way. Thank you for that. Can we talk about, though, I'm going to skip a little bit of the whole Simon Dawes, started a band kind of out of high school with our good friend Taylor Goldsmith, kind of did that. And then after that ended and you were trying to think about your music career, can you talk a little bit about how you went from high school band to getting here a little bit?
Sure. Well, after discovering that I was not a huge fan of touring around the country and playing the same songs every night over and over and over again in a live setting, I found my way into doing more session work, which was sort of the opposite. I get to stay home throughout the year and had a wide variety of music to play on and to work with, and met a lot of incredible musicians and stuff. And I think through those relationships and those projects, just found a community of like-minded creative people, and that's how I met Pino. Was on a record.
Which record was that?
That was the John Legend record.
Yeah.
I asked Pino and Chris Dave to come in and be the rhythm section for that whole album, and it was obviously the right thing for the record, but it was also the perfect opportunity, working with John and his music, to reach out to Pino, because I hadn't really gotten a chance, on a project that seemed like the right thing to call him or someone like Chris for. After getting to know him better, it's quickly come to my attention. You can call him for anything.
We were just talking about that on the last one of these things, where someone like Joe Russo, who has he doesn't play in a thing. He every day of the week he could do one of his projects that he plays with and session work. How you to be able to open that community up and being called in for, I need you on a jazz gig, a singer-songwriter gig, a rock gig, and be able to kind of fill that. It's the same for you, Pino. We don't want to date, because you and I are more the same age. I don't want to date your thing, but it's a little funny having the Blake here, who's a little younger than we are.
A young whippersnapper.
Yeah, the whippersnapper. But tell us a little bit about your kind of coming into finding out that session work kind of fit your niche a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I started off in bands, as most people do, just local bands. And my first session in a studio, I just remember putting the headphones on and hearing the sound of the bass in the headphones and thinking, I can do this. So I just fell into it, really. And long story short, once I started making a little money from it, I thought maybe I could have a career doing this.
Well, I wanted to actually talk about that. Do you guys kind of remember saying, I'm making enough that I actually might be able to do this, this is the thing I might want to be able to say, I'm a career musician now because I can do this. Do you kind of remember that, roughly when that started to be like, maybe I'll have to get back on the road, or maybe I'll have to do this, that, or anything? Do you remember that kind of moment?
I mean, I don't remember a particular moment where I thought, yeah, I'm actually making enough money to be officially a musician. It just gradually happened over a period of time, and I got to a point where I thought, I can't do anything else, so I better really try and do my best at this.
Right. Blake, do you remember kind of that same feeling of being like, you know what, I made the right decision not to go out on the road and get on the tour bus and play the song over and over and over again?
It's definitely a different path than being in an Econoline and playing.
From band, your big graduation, I made it from the band to the bus. That's like this graduation ceremony, right? That's when they hand you a diploma with your bus key.
Well, if you stick with the van long enough to make it to the bus, you deserve the bus.
That's right. Absolutely.
We didn't have a straight. My path wasn't necessarily as straight from obscurity into becoming a better known touring act.
Well, you're being humble. I mean, I remember one of your first things, if I'm not, it was like Lucinda Williams, right? That was kind of pretty.
Once I'd left Simon Dawes,
right,
I started doing session work, and I would play on records, and then at the conclusion of that record, that artist would have to put a band together.
And they'd be like,
okay,
Blake,
can you
come
come?
on,
Yeah,
Blake.
they would just try to get all of the
Right.
session
And you'd be
musicians
like,
to play.
yeah, of course.
And I was like, I don't really like touring, but I want to see what the bus situation is all about,
Right.
you know, or like touring, you know, touring Europe with somebody who's, it's their audience, you know, so you don't have the pressure of when you're performing in a band or as a solo artist, you don't have the pressure of the hustle and whether people are going to show up to your gig or not, and trying to remember your own lyrics and all that.
You're there to serve the artist's material.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the
Absolutely.
job.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, you become more of an agreeable person and musician to work with. You are kind of like, it's a double. There's two things going on. You're trying to serve the artist, but at least in the case of musicians like us on sessions, I think we're also there because of our personalities. You know, like it's like I want you to do what I want you to do, but I want you to do what you want to do at the same time and have them be the same thing. It's like guess the number I'm thinking in my head.
It's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you are there to serve the artist,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you hope to be able to express something
It's-
that comes from you and that they're going to dig. So it's
Well, what's genius about both of you, and I don't use that word lightly, is from my very limited perspective, but having known both of your work, what's fascinating, it's like hand someone the lyrics to the song, and even put the keys, obviously that are in C, D, whatever, hand it to them, and you could walk in, sit down, and play it, and you could take the exact same guitar, sit down and play it, and totally different vibe, feel, whatever. So, yeah, of course that means like, hey,
Yeah.
this is the thing I'm trying to get. I mean, what did Weir say? I want kind of like, you know, really thick air. You know, you kind of get these things. Can you make it a little more purple and a little less blue? And you kind of hear these things, and you're trying your best to extrapolate what the person who may have created the song is trying to get out of you, right? I mean, that's got to be a pretty intense thing to say, okay, I'm listening to what you're saying, but I still got to put a little bit of me, because if you don't want a little bit of me, let me get the robot, and you can sit him here and
Yeah.
program the thing, right?
There's also a need for that too. You know, there's a sound to something being kind of neutral. It's like a flavor in a way, and it's not like every dish requires every single ingredient to just be.
that's right. Sometimes you have to try and be
Fantastic.
a little bit invisible too.
Yeah.
So
If
to
you
not
have a strong
distract.
character.
You
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah.
distract
Yeah.
from the overall thing by adding your thing that's like, this thing's really spicy. Someone put way too much cumin in this thing,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like, no, my job is to make sure that you just got to put an ingredient in there that works with the others and not have the thing that comes right over the top.
Sometimes it's about the celery.
Sometimes, well, yeah, you got to make stock, right? That's the stock.
Well, the priority really is just not making it worse.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah.
you, Pino, could you not make it bad?
Yeah.
That's what
Right,
I'm
right,
looking
right.
for here.
Yeah, that's the
right?
kind of
We're going to try it
production
one
thing.
more time.
So how does that usually work? You talked about both have mentioned community and bands. I mean, I know there's probably no, it always happens this way, but hey, you know, whether it be Jenny Lewis, Bob Dylan, I just know some of the people, you know, the Who calling and being like, hey, we've got this block of time carved out. Are you free? I mean, how does the process? I mean, I know they're all in the same, but give me an example of a process of how all of a sudden you find yourself in the room with an artist as a studio.
Do
artist.
you mean now, or do you mean in the
No.
beginning?
Now.
Well,
It varies. It really varies.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could just be a one-day session where you're going to get to just throw some ideas over a bunch of different songs, and the producer or whoever's in charge or the artist will cut that up later on, decide how they want to process what
So you're
you've done.
playing to a track sometimes? Is that-
Yeah. It'll just
Okay.
be a track that's previously done, or
Got it.
other times it could be a full band all playing together for a period of, say, 3 or 4 days in the studio, cutting a bunch of tracks and just trying to cut them live. So it really varies a lot, you know.
yeah.
Blake, is that
My session work took me more into production
Right.
at a certain point, and if I'm producing a solo artist and there isn't a band attached already
Can we,
to them.
let's use Brittany Howard. Can we use the
Yeah.
Brittany Howard record?
Well, Brittany, I didn't produce Brittany's solo record.
No.
But yes, the Alabama Shakes record.
Sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So producing Alabama Shakes, it was like I barely played anything on that record.
Right, but that was you trying to help the sauce get made, you know, using that bad analogy again, food. But like, that was your job on that. It's kind of like, would you say that in sometimes producing is a little bit by being like a session musician, but the conductor?
Yeah, I think so. I think well, producing is basically trying to figure out what is needed for the best results. Mm-hmm. And to some degree, being a session musician is the same job description, but the lane might be narrower.
It's much narrower.
Right?
I mean,
so like as a producer, I've said this before, like sometimes it's about knowing how to record the band, and sometimes it's about knowing when to take a break and order pizza. Like it really can be non-musical, it can be non-creative, it's logistics and stuff. So it's it is kind of like a glorified session musician role, but it becomes more complicated.
I'm sure.
As well.
It's much harder, I think. I've done both, and it's much harder. As a session musician, you can do what you're required to do, and maybe add some colors to the musical sort of palette. But then you're done, and you go home and have dinner, right?
You can go home
if
and
you're
not
the producer,
be sitting there.
You got to babysit the whole thing.
Right.
I mean, it's a much bigger commitment, I think.
Yeah, it's a longer process. But I kind of get freaked out when I'm doing a session, and if I don't know the producer very well. And I think
how do you bury your producer when you're asked to be the session musician as someone, both of you who produced? Yeah. How hard is it to clamp down on the tongue and be like,
not hard. No, not hard. Like
you can feel it, right? Because there's a time where you feel you can actually offer something, and there's a time where you think, I'm just gonna let this play out.
You might agree to do it because you're a big fan of the artist and you're not familiar with the producer. But you go in excited and you contribute something, and you don't know what's going to happen to it after you leave, like you were saying, once they start to chop stuff up, or if they decide to take a left turn with the song later on, which happens. Mm-hmm. You have
to be okay with that, because you've given a part of yourself, artistically, and you have to be okay with, wow, I thought I did a great line, but just because it's not that you didn't do a great line, it's just, hey, we kind of took the left turn, and then your piece needed to be left over here, and it's kind of, I never really thought about that. It's interesting because usually when you give something artistically out there and you think you're adding to it, and then to find out maybe not even until 3 months later when you get the final thing, you're like, oh, they didn't use that or anything.
We've both been in the room when like some of the most mind-boggling stuff has been muted.
Right.
Like some of the coolest playing has been muted, and you know why, and you're like, this is gonna be sad, it's like a big haircut, but it's complicated stuff, and it's sort of like, it's like a scene, right? And especially music with words, with a singer, in a narrative or something, like the scene, the focus of the scene sometimes needs to be on one particular character, and if somebody else in the frame is doing something unusual, even if it's great, it's sort of like
stepping on the line a little bit.
Yeah, a little. Like, how do you balance that in a way to where, everything everybody's doing, every little gesture, the lighting, the makeup, the costumes, everything is all funneling towards when there needs to be focus on one person. Not all music is that, of course, but like most pop music or songs or whatever is there's that idea of like it's all about the vocal. Everybody says it's all about the song, which means it's all about the vocal, really, is what you're saying. So you start to try to get clever and become creative on how many different ways you can frame a vocal.
Right.
Yeah,
there's an art to, I only need this little thing, and then it's how much space you're giving it and how much, sometimes you can get really creative by not a blank canvas. Mm-hmm. Like it's, hey, there's a line, it's this big on this big painting, I need to figure out, if you can fit this one line in between these things that are solid. We like everything about this, we're just looking for this one, bass line or this one riff. We just need this one riff, and now you're like, okay, my puzzle piece is very distinct of what I'm trying to fit into that puzzle piece as much as I can without just, kind of just being like, okay.
Going through the motions.
Going through the motions, exactly, thanks. I guess what I'd love to kind of wrap up on it is, if again, with the whippersnapper, we can leave him on the side for a second, but of all your years of experience, and you could look back at being somebody, kind of in the beginning, and not say this is what I screwed up, so don't do that. What do you think you did really well? What do you think has been a thread piece of something that you do well, that you would have, that started way back then, and you're glad you kept it?
I get lucky. I do that really
That's
well.
pretty good. Yeah.
I do luck pretty
I don't
well.
100% believe that, but I'm going to push you a little bit more. Come on, what's one thing that you think you did?
Wow. I
well?
mean, to work with so many different artists in so many different environments, I think personality has a lot to do with it. And just being able to roll with the punches and make a joke, and times, like Blake said, sometimes it's time to call time for a meal or a break or take 5 or make someone feel at ease with what they're doing. It's more about communication than actually playing music, I think.
That's an incredibly great piece of advice, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes
you just got to try and sense the situation and just try and make it work for everyone.
Anything to add to that, Blake?
I like that. It's sort of like it's like showing up for a conversation, like a meal. You know, like you can contribute something to a conversation just from your perspective. You don't necessarily need to be adept, you know, and know everything that everybody else in the room knows to offer some insight, or to just be a listener, which helps a conversation. One thing that I think is also healthy for people to learn how to do for themselves is to say no to stuff. To learn how to say no to like things that you know you're not the right person for a number of reasons. It's like obviously self-preservation, but then you're allowing somebody else who is the right person to have a chance at getting that gig, and it's not just like hoarding, you know, session work or gigs or whatever, but also how to say no in a way that conveys that it's not like it's something that you feel is beneath you or that you don't dig, and to not be disrespectful. I think there's a certain capacity that creative people reach, or there's a mindset that you might want to be in to give your best work. And if you can't reserve some space for that or protect that a little bit, put a little shield around it, you might be incredibly prolific at a certain point, but you are not potentially doing your best work. So there's a lot of crap out there, you know, and now it's out there for good. Like it goes up on YouTube and that's it.
There it ends. Right?
Yeah. So I think spending some time, you know, thinking about what the right paths and right gigs have been for me was beneficial.
One other quick one. As you got to become, say, in-demand studio musician, or somebody who has a career where the phone is ringing and you're saying no, you're saying yes, you know, how do you kind of put a value on your time and your work? I mean, how do you negotiate that a little bit? And you know, where do you do it? I mean, my guess is if you like the person, that it could be kind of all over the place. Or
It depends on so many factors. It depends. If it's a young artist that don't have a budget, then you want to help them out if you like the music. Or if it's a big artist, then you want to be paid properly. I mean, if you have a family, you know, I mean, when I was first playing sessions, I didn't have a family or any sort of commitments financially, so I would do stuff for whatever, you know. But then I used to joke with a few friends of mine in the business that your value would go up from the time of the conception of your baby or from the birth, you know. When should it go up? Because you do have to start thinking like that.
Absolutely.
At some point.
I also think that it creates a nice atmosphere when people can be compensated for their work. Like there's a different clock that's going when everybody is there, you know,
that's right.
and you're lucky enough to have, like you said, if it's a bigger artist and you've got maybe the backing of a label behind there, everybody's happy, everybody's being treated fairly. But when you're just starting out, I think there are probably a lot of musicians getting into the business that don't have management and somebody sort of representing them, their interests on, you know, on their behalf.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how like union scale fees work, but a lot of times that is a nice way to just, you know, make sure that it's like, even if it's one of those gigs where you're kind of taking a pay cut because you like the music, or that's just the scenario. At least everybody is kind of in it equally. You're not the only person who's
Right.
You know, like
a most favored nations kind of thing. If we're all egalitarian, like if we're all doing this, then we're all in. We're all in.
Yeah.
We're all in together, right?
That's still how we do it, I think, or at least I know I do, and I know that you do on a lot of sessions.
Yeah, quite a lot of sessions.
Where
There are always exceptions, though. I can't lie.
I could name a couple.
Yeah.
I guess, but I'm not going to guess.
You don't want to be paid more than anybody else. You don't want to be paid less than anybody else.
Right.
It's just kind of like, what is the situation here? And then once you know, you decide, can I afford to do that?
Right.
You know, it's not
That's the question. I
wanting
think
to.
for young artists is, you also said a little bit with your time of learning to say no. Even if, there's two things, Aaron, I don't want to extrapolate, but being able to say no, even if the money is good and you need it,
Yeah.
you're going to go into that session being like, I'm just doing this for the money, and that might not, give you the best thing. And the same token, I don't want to just come in and just give a bunch of free things out there, because eventually then I get called because it's like, they'll do it for no money. So it is got to be one of those things of finding like, look, this is fair.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I want to do it, and this is if we can get to around here, I'm in.
Yeah.
And that itself is a skill, I would think.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, again. Blake Mills, Pino Palladino, Session Work. Thank you.